Today we're talking about European Baroque. Baroque is derived from the word Barocco, which is an irregularly shaped pearl. Baroque is the opposite of Renaissance. Renaissance had an emphasis on humanism, thinking about humans being equal to God, whereas Baroque focuses a new attention to the spiritual values which are greater and more important than man. The Baroque style started in Italy and it emerged from 1550 to 1700. The Baroque style emphasizes dramatic and often strained effect and contains bold curving forms, elaborate ornamentation, and overall balance of different parts. It originated in Rome, but it is split into separate city-states that each have their own design ideas. There was concern about reforms needed in the Catholic Church. Specific concerns were with the buying and selling of church offices, or there was lots of corruption within the church. The Council of Trent started this Catholic Reformation, and it resulted in guidelines being set by the church for the artists and their patrons. Now all art had to show biblical truths, meaning something representational from the Bible, and also there could be no nudity. Artistic styles emphasize drama, contrast in light and dark, movement, and extreme diagonals and curves. These were not only focused on the art, but in the architecture as well. The goal of the Baroque period was harmony or unity of parts in the overall composition of the interior. The wealthy and the royal rivaled in their displays of their homes and the churches. This is a reason for the increase in decoration during this period. To stop the Counter-Reformation, they made exaggerated displays to overwhelm the viewer. The goal of the Baroque period was to create harmony or unity of parts in the overall interior. Architecture, painting, and sculpture were now merged and intertwining. Here you can see two great examples. One is the allegory of divine providence and Barberini power. And on the right you can see a different type of ceiling which shows the contrasting in light and dark and the curved forms of the ceiling. Moving over to France, the Baroque style emerged from 1600 and lasted until 1715. This slide shows the epitome of French Baroque style with the Palace of Versailles built by the Sun King, Louis XIV. There were three styles seen during this period. Louis XIII style, which was a transitional period. Then it moved over with the Bourbon monarchy of Henry IV to Louis XIV. During Louis XIV, the French Baroque was fully developed. Through the period of transition, several things happened that were important for the arts. First, the acts of royalty established workshops and provided support for industries, so the arts were now protected by the crown. This had two advantages. First, art was perceived as a distinguishing factor for the state, and second, they felt that the arts with their patronage would glorify the crown. The second thing that was important for the arts was that there were many foreign influences, like Italian artists, foreign queens or regents, and the regents had the power over the minors. So oftentimes, if a king died and left an heir to the throne who was younger than 18, the queen regent would have power until the minor was old enough to be in power of the country. Then the third thing that was important for the arts was that Louis XIV acted as a deterrent toward the French Baroque style, meaning that he favored the Renaissance style. Also during this time, the Edict of Nantes was granted. This granted religious freedom to Protestants, but did not encourage the arts. Louis XIV used the arts to express the brilliance and splendor of the court. He expanded Versailles to present the visual image of the prestige of the French crown. Jean-Baptiste Colbert was appointed minister responsible for the building of the crown. This office organized the arts and created unified standards. Colbert appointed Charles Lebrun to help with the decorative schemes at Versailles, and these two were instrumental in helping impose strict criterion of taste and established a central control over the arts. Now France replaced Italy as the artistic leader of Europe during the reign of Louis XIV. Louis XIV eventually revoked the Edict of Nantes and re-established Catholicism. Many French Protestants were artisans, and some 200,000 fled the country. This seriously affected the arts industry and the financial stability of Rome. Holland, England, and colonial America benefited from these exiles of craftsmen. The Louis XIV style was created in the late 17th centuries, and other countries now look to France for their artistic inspiration. After 1690, extensive building could not be done because the country was too poor because of excessive building during the reign of Louis XIV and because of the wars that were happening. This also paved the way for the French Revolution that happened about 75 years later. During Louis XIII's period, greater attention had been given to privacy and comfort in both wealthy and middle-class homes, which transcended through the Baroque style. Now looking to England, their Baroque style started in 1660 and lasted to only 1702. It happened when Charles II took the throne of England. This was the beginning of the change. Political and aesthetic influences would influence the English taste, especially because so many people had merged over and escaped France, traveling to England. Economic prosperity was essential for the arts to flourish now, as the Civil War had just ended. The Whig nobility had control of the monarchy and would prosper. Nobles gained political achievements and increased their land holdings by purchasing the estate of small landholders, whom had suffered many hardships and needed the money. So the rich became richer and the poor became poorer. This led to a gradual increase in building during Charles II's reign. The city of London needed to build because of much devastation caused by the Great Fire of 1666. Sir Christopher Wren was a big influence at this time, and he was one of the many who imposed the stipulations of the Rebuilding Act of 1667. This stated that walls had to be a certain thickness and floor heights had to be a certain height, and also what types of materials could be used in building. Very few country houses were being built at this time because of political uncertainty. The Glorious Revolution took place in 1688. With fighting over the privileges of Parliament versus the King, Parliament won out, and this again put the Whig nobility in power. The Whigs accepted William III and Mary II as joint monarchs, which would bring influences from both Holland and France to the arts of England. The nouveau riche now had an interest in the arts and spent lots of money decorating and furnishing new monumental country houses. Fashion ideas were spread by gentlemen of the country, as they were educated, cultured, and wealthy, and were the ones who would travel and see the changes of the arts in Holland, France, and other parts of Europe. They were also key in spreading these ideas to the lower class as well. Baroque influence came mainly from France and Holland. Many factors took place for the Dutch influence. There were commercial exchanges between countries. Dutch immigrants worked as craftsmen, the residents of the exiled English court in Holland, and the William and Mary working as joint leaders. The House of Orange, which was William's side as he was the Prince of Orange, looked to Paris for culture and promoted French artistic ideas in Holland. This interest spread by the immigration of the Huguenots, or French Protestants, who were persecuted when the Edict of Nantes was revoked, and then fled from France. Many were skilled craftsmen who spread their creative abilities in the country they settled. French influences were also spread by individual pieces for ornamentation, sets of furniture, and specialized pieces being sold throughout England, as well as published works of designers. Sir Christopher Wren witnessed the building project under Louis XIV of France, which was the Louvre, Fontainebleau, and Versailles. He made his own drawings of details and also purchased books on engravings and designs. All of these factors impacted English space planning, interior architecture, furniture design, decorative detail, and social etiquette based primarily from France and Holland. Looking at the interior, open planning was common during this time. There were many sections of homes stemming off the square or rectangular block of the primary section. The housing provided a background for social events. Intimacy was not a consideration. This was a time known for its use of movement. It was achieved by using ovals instead of circles. Axial planning was central to the Baroque interior, and rooms were distributed symmetrically. Looking at the materials, stucco was now an important feature. It was often used around moldings for windows and doors. Marble and plaster were also incorporated. Walnut carved wood was popular, and the greatest emphasis in the 17th century was on fresco painting. This slide shows an example of Antonio Raggi's stucco. He was mentored by Gian Lorenzo Bernini and supplied him with many of his statue details for his architecture seen throughout Italy. The floors of the Baroque style were very decorative and incorporated lots of colors and patterns. Materials used were tile, marble, stone, and brick. Their walls still incorporated divisions. In the transitional period, the lower part was covered with wood paneling known as boiserie, with horizontality emphasized, with the upper ornamented with tapestries or illusionistic murals. Later, verticality was emphasized, the dado became taller, and an entablature was used to surround the room entirely. Basically, the decorative crown molding with statues or carvings. You can see some examples on page 179. The ceilings ranged from very simple to very complex. They could be flat or vaulted. Materials included stucco, paint, fresco, and illusionistic techniques based on perspective through quattrodura or sodo in su. This contributed to the focal point in the rooms of the wealthy and ruling families. Actually, this slide shows an example of sodo in su, the use of perspective shown from below to represent figures often flying and architectural features in extreme foreshortening. In this slide, you can see an example of quattrodura, which is an illusionistic mural painting similar to trompe-l'oeil, used to visually extend spaces by creating perspective views on flat walls. This slide also shows examples of stairways. The stairways were very elaborate in the respect that they were the most interesting. They were characterized by gradual ascents. Also, the vast openness was absorbed with sculptures and pilasters to fill the voids. Stucco was the most common material used around the windows and doors to enable arched and triangular pediments, and was also used for pilasters, entablatures, and rounded arches. The chimney was a prominent piece during the Renaissance period. However, during the Baroque period, the chimney was not as dominant as well as not as decorative of a feature, but it was still considered a secondary focal point. Now looking at the furniture during this period. The materials and construction of the furniture incorporated walnut as the most common material used. Pietratura was a mosaic using colored stones for panels and tops, and scagliola is an imitation that replaced pietratura. Lacquer was sometimes used due to the high cost of wood. This slide shows another example of the characteristics of pietratura versus scagliola. Pietratura incorporates real material, while scagliola is a painted version, an imitation, a painted representation of pietratura. During the Baroque period, the role of the furniture in the decorative scheme was to emphasize social status, and it also showed the ornamental excesses typical of the interior. Also, the furniture designed was closely related to the architectural design. Emphasis for furniture was on carved and turned members, which were elaborately placed on high-back armchairs and tables. Roman Baroque furniture designs often included aspects of Catholic art and architecture. Because Italian furniture makers of the Baroque era worked in a largely Catholic society, religious themes influenced their choice in ornamentation. They also incorporated armulu mounts, bouillet work, marquetry, gilt gesso, japanning, and vernet et glamour. French furniture styles were inconsistent. The French preferred to look to other countries for inspiration and to import furniture. French craftsmen were to make replicas of foreign models. A national style was not developed until Louis XIII. An identifiable French style was evident around 1660. Lathe turning was used both structurally and decoratively, seen in spirals, balusters, and vases. Thick moldings were applied to give emphasis to cornices, panels, and so on. Solid wood and veneered pieces were created and had different people or specialists for each. During the Louis XIV, perfection of techniques was emphasized over creating new processes. Interiors were designed as ensembles, and furniture needed to coordinate with the stucco wall detail. Solid silver and gold chairs were once created, but were all melted because of the financial crisis of the 18th century. In England, the Caroline furniture was the style of choice, which is also known as Restoration or Charles II. Also seen were William and Mary, which is called the Age of Walnut because of the widespread use of the wood. In England, both solid and veneer forms were used. The use of C&S scrolls and realistically carved details like foliage or fruit were common. Interesting effects like quartering, which is where you take 4 slices of wood used to create a decorative pattern, cross-banding, which is used as a border, grain going in opposite directions, burl, marquetry, and parquetry, which is also known as oyster work, were all used. Oyster work is using small branches of trees as a series of thin slices being cut and laid out, creating a decorative detail out of the annual rings that can be seen. There's an example in your book on page 212. And japanning, which is used to imitate Oriental lacquer. People were curious about Oriental because of the imports from the East India Company. This is how japanning became widespread. In this slide, you can see a few examples of Italian seat furniture. Early on, armchairs, also known as sedias, had high backs, and later they were rectangular with lower backs. They were upholstered with nail heads, emphasis on carved or turned members, and deeply carved or downward scroll arm ends. In France, Louis XIII and Louis XIV styles were dominant. Louis XIII chairs were most comfortable in early periods and easy to upholster. They seemed softer because of the curves that were incorporated, and wool upholstery or moquettes were introduced. Chairs had both tall and low backs, usually rectilinear, and some had a cresting of the back. Tall backs were usually for state chairs. The lower back was separate from the seat, and seats could be square or trapezoidal shaped. Armrests were parallel to the floor or could have a downward curve in the center that would usually end in a whorl or an animal head. Stretchers were at 2 levels with a higher one in front, and turned legs were typical. The X-shaped stool was still used regularly, as the armchair was only used by the most prominent person. For Louis XIV, protocol dictated the seat furniture height from the highest to lowest rank. High-back upholstered armchair, high-back armless chair, and the upholstered stool were all seen. This high-back armchair had a space between the seat and back and was usually fully upholstered. The arms had a downward curve in the center, and arm supports had a sima, which is a curve going in both directions. The curve would rise directly from the legs. It could have an H or X-shaped stretcher. If it had an X shape, there would be a carved decorative motif rising in the center. Later in the Louis XIV period, carving replaced turning, and forms became more relaxed and lightly scaled with delicate curves. Arm pads also started to be used. In England, the Carolean style was prominent. Carving and pierced work were incorporated. The dominant form was spiral turning. Narrow and deep hollows were characteristics in these chairs. Floral and large-scale marquetry designs were also typical. Lesser people sat on stools rather than chairs. The chairs were used for the higher class. The continental chair, introduced during this time, had caning seats and backs. They typically had a tall rectangular back with posts that continued out of the legs and were carved. Bands of carving connected the back uprights. Armrests would go in a downward curve, carved scroll ends with arm supports of a C or S shape. Lower stretchers in an H shape with a flat front stretcher were carved. The upholstered wing chair was introduced, also known as a sleeping chair, and had ratchets to allow one to recline. The daybed became popular, where the back was lower than a typical chair, but the other features were similar. This reflected the more relaxed social atmosphere. The settee or couch began to appear and would usually have 6 legs. Here you can see the William and Mary style furniture. Greater variety and turning was evident. There was a much finer scale. Designs like arabesques and seaweed marquetry were common. The backs were narrow and taller with uprights that had a turned baluster. It had more cresting arches between the uprights. The carved back rail was left an open space from the seat, and the back could be treated in different ways. It could have caning, panels, or maybe separated from the upright. Seats were smaller than in the Carolean period. Armrests also extended beyond supports, but ended in what is termed a ram's horn. There's an example on page 215. Legs were adapted from Louis XIV. The pedestal leg was incorporated with a trumpet or skull. Feet would be square or octagonal, Spanish or bun. an H or X-shaped stretcher was used, and an X had a finial placed in the center, similar to the English. Upholstered chairs were very similar to cane chairs, and upholstered edges would be covered with fringe to hide the edge of the upholstery and also for decoration. Looking at tables, Italian tabletops were rectangular or octagonal, although many tables were diverse. Tables varied in shape, size, and design of stretchers. Tables of royalty had mosaic tops and were often inlaid with geometric shapes and designs. Most tables were constructed of walnut. Both Pietradura and Scagliola were used on storage pieces. Seaweed marquetry was highly characteristic of the storage pieces and was used as an all-over design. A distinction of case pieces can be seen in the way that walnut was used. Carving was not as prominent. Pieces included dressing tables, chest on a stand, chest of drawers, writing furniture, and cabinet. Structural features of the base included 4 to 6 turned or double C legs connected with a straight or shaped perimeter stretcher. Louis XIII tables were small and had surface supported by turned legs in a variety of configurations with a stretcher of an H or X shape. At the center of the stretcher there was often an ornament. A popular type was the rectangular with extensions which allowed the table to double in length. There's an example seen on page 187. Louis XIV tables had a variety of tables depending on the function. There was a bureau plat, which is a writing table, and was designed to complement the interior ensemble and was often placed against a wall. Louis XIII storage included cupboards of several types, and it had simple panels or with a diamond point ornament with moldings as the means of decoration. For Louis XIV, the commode or chest of drawers was introduced, and it resembled the cassone on page 188. The tops would overhand the 2-drawer commode. Tall and low cabinets were created. Caroline tables often were rectangular, although round tables started to become dominant. Meals were served on several small tables rather than one large one. Tables were used in the center of the room, and so they were finished on all sides, or if they were to go up against a wall, would be finished on only 3 sides. Tables were made for specific functions. Looking at their storage pieces, the chest of drawers, chest on a stand, dressing table, and a small desk on a stand were seen. They were usually veneered with large-scale marquetry, and the drawer fronts usually had cross banding or herringbone. Chests of drawers had 5 turned legs joined by a stretcher with bun feet. Here you can see an example of the William and Mary furniture with the drop pulls and the bun feet on each storage piece. The storage on the left is the chest of drawers on legs, and the storage on the right is a small desk on a stand. The one on the left shows the large-scale marquetry, and the one on the right shows the cross banding. Now let's move on to beds. The Italian beds were made of walnut, iron, or silver, and were often treated with precious stones and sometimes included optional canopies. You can see the large scale of the Baroque period in the bed on the right, which shows you the canopy. Also, if you look closely, you can see the paneling shown on the underside of the top piece, the canopy, which would have paintings included in that paneling. The Louis XIII beds had an emphasis on upholstery and textiles. Until 1670, textiles played a major part in the draping of the bed. Kings and queens would often receive their subjects from their beds, so they had to be very stately. Louis XIV beds also were draped with rich textiles. The state bedroom was purely ornamental, and the degree of elaboration was a reflection on the wealth of the citizen. Draperies were still used for function, and the four-poster still was used until the end of the Louis XIV period. In the late 17th century, beds were constructed with both head and footboards, and a textile hanging was behind the headboard. In England, the tester bed was the focal point of important bedchambers. The excessive height made it very imposing. Some could be as large as 14 feet tall. And lavish attention was paid to the textiles. Often it was the largest cost of the whole bed. Textiles were used for cornice, tester, valance, and drapery, and curtains hung from rods on all four sides. It had a headboard, often of raised embroidery, and the most prized finial treatments were those using ostrich feathers on the top. This concludes our slideshow on European Baroque. The following slides beyond this point show more examples of decorative details used during the Baroque period.